So you just had the opening, or one of the key fireside chats with Yat Siu, who was a guest on Animoca Brands, and he's very encouraged by this new scheme that we might get details of, essentially, legalizing retail cryptocurrency trading here in Hong Kong. Ravi Menon of the MAS was just talking about elevating the guardrails for the retail side to, mitigate against the risks to the retail investors. Is Hong Kong lowering the guardrails? What's your strategy as far as attracting retail investors into crypto?
As you can see from our announcement just now, what we're trying to do is to grow this virtual asset ecosystem in a responsible and sustainable manner. Because after all, if you look at a virtual asset by its nature, there are two sides to it. Of course, there are the technological aspects to it, including blockchain, DLT, so on and so forth, which are positive in terms of bringing about efficiency to a financial system or economy or trade finance, at the same time lowering transaction cost. But at the same time, there's potentially negative side to it, taking into account the anonymous nature of virtual assets, like money laundering risk, terrorist financing, so on and so forth. And that's why, in the coming few months, there are a number of things that we will do, and also set out in our policy statement. Number one is that we will have a legislation, basically to regulate the virtual asset trading platform or the virtual asset exchanges in such a way that we'll subject them to similar regulation like a financial institution, covering like internal control, disclosure, so on and so forth. So that's number one. And number two, back to the point about retail participation, our regulator will issue a consultation document, basically try to engage the market in terms of how we can get the retail access to this new regulatory regime. That's number two. And number three that we will do at the same time also by our regulator is to issue a circular, basically to allow the ETFs on virtual assets. Because after all, even before these announcements, you already see many financial institutions launching ETP, exchange traded products on virtual assets. So now what we are trying to do is to allow also the ETFs with virtual assets as underlying. So all in terms of the three initiatives I just highlighted, they all combined are from the policy and also regulatory angle in terms of how we want to develop and grow this ecosystem in a responsible and sustainable manner.
And what time frame are we looking at? I mean, Bloomberg had a story last week, and we're looking at maybe implementation as early as March. It seems like awfully soon to come up with this kind of regulatory certainty when you have to have some trial runs and trial programs, don't you?
In fact, the legislation is now being vetted by our legislature, and basically we have meetings with them to highlight to them what are the key features, and they will debate upon it, and it's something that hopefully with the approval will come soon. But at the same time thereafter, of course, the regulatory work I just highlighted will continue. But that said, in terms of our policy statement, one thing we also highlight is the fact that we welcome the VA community, and that's why even before the passage of the law, our regulator and also our investment agencies, Invest Hong Kong, has also been in touch with some of these players to understand their concerns and to see how we may facilitate them.
How significant is the fact, and this is what Yat Siu just mentioned, one thing that stuck out to him was the fact that Hong Kong has been able to differentiate itself on crypto assets from the mainland, where cryptocurrency trading is essentially banned on the mainland. How did Hong Kong carve that differential out from mainland policy? Yes, one country, two systems. Is that being exemplified?
Yeah, definitely. Because after all, we operate under a different regulatory regime. We have our own currency. We have a separate legal system. I think all these underpin the world-class regulation in our financial markets. And similarly, in terms of our strengths as an international financial center, one country, two systems is the key.
Yeah. Again, you talked about the risk mitigation. Some would say that perhaps in Hong Kong there's a little bit more risk aversion here in Hong Kong. How does that play in, especially after what we've seen in the cryptocurrency space since November of last year, a real implosion of value? I mean, the decimation, they're calling it the next ice age.
you point to the point regarding the importance of investor education. Because after all, regarding crypto, virtual assets, or these new things, basically these are new elements to certain people. So we need to keep up with our efforts on investor education. And in fact, there has been ongoing efforts to do so. Through our regulator, through our investor education agencies, we are doing all of that. In terms of, first of all, highlighting to them what it is. Secondly, how they can be involved, and secondly, what are the things they should be bearing in mind if they want to be involved. So these are the things that we will do and will continue to do.
So do you see very shortly, do you see the ecosystem over what time frame expanding, where perhaps you can get tokenization of stocks and bonds, and even the introduction of derivatives?
In fact, we are also doing our part by the government in terms of identifying these use cases. Because after all, these innovations need applications. Like, for example, this time at the FinTech Week, we dish out 2,000 NFTs, allowing people, first of all, practically to get discount if they come back next year, and also at the same time to allow them to form a community. And in such a way that we can disseminate them information about our FinTech ecosystem. And secondly, it's about we will tokenize our issue of green bonds. This is something that we will do.